The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
A pivotal moment in a landmark case. Joy and relief from campaigners in Edinburgh. And outside the Supreme Court in London too. They've won their battle over the legal definition of what a woman is.
We counsel against reading this judgment as a triumph of one or more groups in our society at the expense of another. It is not.
But it is a significant defeat for the Scottish Government, who argued transgender people with a gender recognition certificate should have the same sex-based protections as biological women. A ruling which could place greater restrictions on trans people in Scotland, England and Wales.
It means that women's spaces are finally secure. We can restore that in our public sector organisations. So all hospital wards, all changing rooms, they will all be women only.
I can't be any more delighted. Excuse the tears. It's brilliant news. Lesbians can actually have places of their own.
The noise around gender identity in Scotland has been deafening in the wake of Nicola Sturgeon's attempts to push forward reforms before she stepped down as First Minister.
Do you think this ruling puts this fierce debate in Scotland to bed?
No, because the people that were arguing the other way feel as passionately as we do.
At these London celebrations, though, a note of dissent.
Trans rights are human rights, for now!
The Equality Act still gives transgender people protection against discrimination, but there is concern in the community about what comes next.
I'm absolutely gutted by today's ruling. I think it undoes 20 years of understanding that if a transgender person with a gender recognition certificate has obtained that GRC, that they are, for almost all legal intents and purposes, their acquired gender. It feels like the UK is an increasingly scary place to be openly trans, and I think that this ruling is only going to make that worse.
I just remind the House that the Right Honourable Gentleman struggled to define what a woman was.
For years it has been an uncomfortable issue for Keir Starmer and his party. The government welcomed today's ruling.
I think what it does do is give clarity to women and service providers. And obviously, more widely, single-sex spaces are protected in the law and they will remain protected under this government.
Speaking on a podcast this afternoon, Scotland's First Minister accepted the outcome.
Do you think that on behalf of the Scottish Government you owe women an apology?
We've acted in good faith on this question. We've tried to navigate our way through two pieces of legislation, and during which, of course, our position has been supported twice by courts in Scotland in this particular case. So the debate has been around very uncertain areas of definition, and the Supreme Court has concluded on that, and that's an end to the matter.
But politically and practically, the full ramifications of this ruling will need to be assessed long after the singing stops.
Well, we can talk now to the gender-critical activist Maya Forstater, who won a legal battle after being let go by her employer after she stated in social media messages that transgender women are men. And Samantha Kane is a transgender barrister who joins us from the Highlands of Scotland. Maya Forstater first. Is this a victory for common sense, or is it a licence to vilify trans people?
It is a victory for common sense, and it's a victory for women's rights. Calling someone a man or a woman is not vilifying them, it's just describing them accurately. And you need to be able to describe people accurately in order to keep them safe and in order to protect other people's rights. So even talking about it in terms of vilification is wrong. Everybody is born male or female, and that cannot change. And that doesn't mean that they have to live their life according to gender stereotypes, but it does mean that they have to respect other people's rights and privacy.
Samantha Kane, the court has just given biological women back their basic rights.
Yes. Well, if I may jump into here, the issue here is that the ruling of today has already misinterpreted. It's not really for a court, with all respect to the Supreme Court, of course, is to define what's a man or what's a woman. They merely interpreted a very narrow aspect of the Equality Act. And in my view, this definition being taken out of context and indeed inflamed transphobia and other suffering of an already marginalized group in society.
Right. Well, let me get you to answer that, Maya, that this has inflamed transphobia and a marginalised group is now more fearful than it was.
I don't think this has inflamed transphobia at all. The Equality Act protects people against discrimination and harassment. It protects everyone based on their sex, their age, disability, race, and what's called gender reassignment, so being trans. So everyone is still protected against discrimination and harassment at work, using a service, renting a flat, at university, at school, and so on. This is not about transphobia, it's about protecting women's rights, which means you have to know what a woman is. And one thing the Supreme Court said very clearly was that there's very little in common between the group of women, people who are female, born with female bodies, who can dress as they like, and they're not necessarily feminine archetypes, and men who wish to be feminine archetypes. It's an experience in life that a woman just can't have, of being a man who wishes he was a woman.
Yes,
so they're different groups.
Samantha.
Yeah, can I come in here? I'm afraid that's quite an unfair generalization. I mean, some of us, the pioneers in sex reassignments, when we underwent that many, many decades ago, we forgot that we were men. I tried to become a man all my life. I couldn't. I literally couldn't. It is not a choice. We were born like this. There's a medical procedure to go through. There is female hormones every transgender takes, which actually feminize every single cell of their body. So even the biology eventually changed. I'll give you one example for your information. I had an intimate relationship with a medical doctor in my youth who never realized I was transgender female. And that's to give you an example. So how you expect me and people like me to go into some male changing room? And I mean, this is a ridiculous, really.
Maya, let me get you to answer that.
I'm not for words. Very often I'm not.
Samantha, let Maya answer your point.
So a gender recognition certificate, in order for somebody to get one, they don't have to have surgery, they don't have to take hormones. All they need to have is a diagnosis, and you can get a diagnosis now for a few £100s on the internet. So, and obviously people who are running public services or people who are using services, for example, if a woman wants a female doctor, she should be able to have a female doctor. And if a man wishes he was a woman and wants to be in that situation, the woman can't ask what surgery have you had and doesn't want to know. You know, the last thing you want to do is talk about somebody's intimate details. So unfortunately, when you have rules, they have to be clear.
Samantha, let me just ask you, after today's ruling, will you continue to call yourself a trans woman or a woman?
I'm not a trans woman, I'm a woman. As simple as that. We don't have a hierarchy of women. All women are equal, and really this is an issue where it is just really by some, with respect, either hate a group or somebody trying to actually incite hatred. Because
Maya, let me just put that back to Maya. Do you accept and respect Samantha's definition of herself there?
People can use whatever words they like to describe themselves. Some people call themselves non-binary. But the point is, when you're interacting with other people, with the state, as an employer, as a service provider, or sharing spaces, then the fact that Samantha wants to call himself a woman or non-binary or any of 56 genders is something I can respect as a form of self-expression, but not as a reason to come into a women's space or play in a women's sport, or be in a women's rape crisis centre.
Well, you just referred to Samantha as a man there. Do you not accept that what Lord Hodge said today is that trans people are still protected from discrimination and harassment under the Equality Act, and therefore you describing Samantha as a man there could be viewed as discriminatory or harassing?
No, it's not. What Lord Hodge said was the Equality Act protects trans people from harassment and discrimination. So that means things like you shouldn't be fired at work, you shouldn't be paid less than another person, you shouldn't be refused a booking at a restaurant or refused to be able to rent a flat, for example. But it doesn't mean that other people have to pretend that you are the sex that you're not, or to refer to you in the way that you want to be referred to as.
Let me get a response from Samantha to that. Samantha.
What is the danger of this group that is really mostly marginalized and mostly frightened and so on the general public or indeed women? I mean, what is the fear here from me and other people like me? What's so frightening about that?
I mean, I haven't talked about fear, but I mean, for example, men do the majority of crime, the majority of violent crime, 98% of sex crimes, and that's one of the reasons why we have single-sex spaces and services, why we have men's prisons and women's prisons. It's to protect women. And men who identify as transgender, who identify as trans women, are a vulnerable group. They're a vulnerable group of men, and they can be kept safe in men's prisons, for example.
Right, Maya Forstater, I know many people would disagree with what you've just said, but thank you very much, and to Samantha Kane as well. Thank you both very much for coming on the programme.
The Supreme Court's unanimous decision that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act refer to a biological woman and biological sex. The Tory leader Kemi Badenoch was quick to react.
Sex has always meant biological sex, and what we have seen is a lot of people misinterpreting the law. They've had guidelines from all sorts of organisations that actually do not follow the law. So I really welcome this judgment.
Well, the judgment has been welcomed by many, but has dismayed trans rights campaigners. So where does this leave their movement? Kieran Moodley has been taking a look.
This was the fight for LGBTQ rights. Police officers clubbing marches in 1970. Just a year after the Stonewall riot in New York. Even though trans people were part of the early movement, they have often struggled for acceptance alongside their allies. The long march to equality took decades, and in America it seemed to culminate in the 2015 Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-sex marriage.
This decision affirms what millions of Americans already believe in their hearts. When all Americans are treated as equal, we are all more free.
But were transgender people equal? Later that year, this advert ran in Texas.
Any man at any time could enter a woman's bathroom simply by claiming to be a woman that day.
Claiming trans people were predators taking advantage of women in bathrooms.
This is not over!
And so began a new, loud chapter of the culture war, with the trans community saying they were being scapegoated, while opponents claimed women's rights were at risk. The Obama administration stood with transgender people.
We see you, we stand with you, and we will do everything we can to protect you going forward. And please know that history is on your side.
I love your question. But history didn't see Donald Trump coming along. He banned trans people from serving in the military, and soon Republican states began to row back LGBTQ rights more broadly. It was around this time in the UK that the author J.K. Rowling entered the fray, saying that trans women were not women, and that making it easier for people to transition would infringe on women's rights and female-only spaces. In the UK last year, the Cass Review found that children questioning their gender identity were let down by a lack of research. That coincided with Elon Musk speaking about his own child who transitioned, saying it was all part of an ideology.
They call it dead naming for a reason.
Yeah,
all right, so the reason it's called dead naming is because your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus.
Kamala supports transgender sex changes in jail with our money.
Trans people are now constantly being targeted by the Republican machine, which Musk was funding during last year's presidential election.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear that I will...
Come Trump's second inauguration, the issue was front and center.
There are only two genders, male and female.
The populist rise has been seen everywhere. Just last week, Hungary's parliament said the government could now ban public events held by the LGBTQ community. But backlash begets backlash, with Democrats in America saying they will fight back.
Trans people are people first. Their identity and sexual orientation has never and will never make them any lesser, no matter what any president or billionaire wants to say.
What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor?
The first showdown is coming after President Trump signed an executive order to ban transgender athletes from women's sports. The state of Maine said it would not comply. Today, the White House sued Maine's education department.
The Department of Justice will not sit by when women are discriminated against in sports. This is about sports. This is also about these young women's personal safety.
As the fight for trans equality goes on in America, does today's UK Supreme Court decision mark a line in the sand, or will it make some wonder why the trans community, such a tiny, marginalised people, has become the focus of so much anger and division?
Well, I'm joined now by Ant Lexer, who plays Abby Montgomery in the hit Netflix series Sex Education, and Charlie Craggs, who's an activist and author of To My Trans Sisters. Ant, first of all, how has this left you feeling tonight?
I would describe it as heartbreak. I feel heartbroken. Like, getting myself out of bed this morning was hard after receiving this news this morning, and the only thing keeping me afloat is that I have received so many messages of support and solidarity from people within my community and outside of it. And
heartbroken, why? I mean, is it about your place in society?
I am first and foremost a woman. That doesn't feel like some political stance. It just feels like who I am. And it has always felt like who I am. So not being recognised within law, especially a law that is designed to protect us, and that was why it was there, just feels terrifying. Not even about today, but the precedent that it's setting for not just the UK, but across the world. It just has left me feeling unprotected.
Charlie, I mean, you do lots of things, but you are more of an activist, I suppose, than Ant. So where do you place this historically in terms of your struggle?
I mean, historically, we've been through so much, so I'm not worried about all that our community is going to be able to get through this. I'm more worried about the community of the women campaigning for this law change, of what they're going to do with their time now, because so much of their time has been spent campaigning for this win for them, but what have they actually won?
So you don't feel set back?
Honestly, no. I'm more bored than anything. I think they've been campaigning for the last 5 or so years under the guise of, as JK is always saying, it's not transphobia, it's just about protecting women from predatory men who, as you can see in that video just played now, it's all about how predatory men could lie about being trans and put on a dress and go into a bathroom. So really, they've always said, like, this isn't transphobia, it's not about trans women, it's about predatory men. But in banning us from women's spaces and forcing us to use men's spaces with those predatory men, I don't see how this is a win for anyone, and I don't see how these people can sleep with a conscience knowing they're sending trans women into bathrooms with predatory men who are going to harass them.
Will this change your daily life at all?
I think it won't really change my daily life at all, because, I mean, what are you going to do? Put me in prison? Okay, put me in a men's one, please. But I think it's going to affect a lot more people's than just trans people's lives, and that's actually what I'm looking forward to, because I think when people realise that it's going to be butch lesbians being asked why they're in women's bathrooms, because that's already happening. I have many friends who have been stopped in bathrooms who are just cisgender, born women, lesbians. women, there was a viral post recently going around about a woman who's going through chemo who was affronted in a bathroom and asked why she was in there, and they assumed she was trans because she was bald. We see women from different cultures who are built differently to like the kind of Western ideal of femininity being constantly policed over their gender. We see it in the Olympics. Every time there's Olympics, there's a female athlete who is policed over, are they really a woman? These are it's going to hurt lesbians, it's going to hurt women going through things like chemo, it's going to hurt women from different cultures, it's going to hurt a lot more than trans people. And if anything, I look forward to that, because then we can all rally together and prove that this was just absolute nonsense and it's not protecting anyone.
And will this change your life at all on a day-to-day basis?
I second Charlie in that it doesn't necessarily change my life in terms of the protection I was already receiving, because transphobia has existed for a very long time. But it breaks my heart to wake up every day thinking that when I grew up in rural Devon and I didn't see queer people surrounded me in the adults and in the community, I felt so isolated, and the only thing I associated with transness was fear and danger, and like having our identities constantly questioned just makes me so entirely worried for the young trans people who already feel alone.
And do you think this makes it easier to question your existence?
Yeah, and
because
just
there's a
feel
legal legitimacy to it.
Yeah, and it's when it's a headline and it's you see these women who are proclaimed feminists celebrating that we are being not protected by law. How is that going to make a young trans woman feel who's already terrified and confused?
So just briefly, I mean, for both of you, what is the goal for you both now in terms of, you know, the trans rights movement? Should it be legal recognition, or have you hit a brick wall on that and that's gone?
I think being recognised as a woman legally is really important.
You still want that?
I still want that, because I think it means that then we can start looking at the things that intersect how we are affected as women and as trans women, because there is a difference.
And Charlie?
I don't care too much about being recognised as a woman, because I just don't want to be recognised at all. I just want to be left alone, and I think that's what we all want after this war against our tiny community. We are less than 1% of the population, and it's been a constant onslaught against us, and we just want to be left alone.
Well, Charlie Craggs and Lexa, thank you both very much indeed for joining us tonight.